True confession, I like to make tiny food. A lot of times when I'm looking for a recipe, I'll find something that sounds delicious and I'll say, but can I make it tiny? And today, I found the perfect recipe. It's a scone made with Earl Grey tea, I'm using Lady Grey, and blackberries. And we're gonna make them tiny. These blackberry tea scones include some of the usual ingredients. I've got flour, sugar, baking soda, baking powder. I'm using buttermilk today, an egg, of course butter, and then the stars of the show are fresh blackberries and Lady Grey tea. So a scone is just a sweet biscuit, and I am all for that. And this one has the tea right inside. We're gonna start with a teaspoon and a half of Lady Grey tea is what I'm using today. And we're just gonna grind that in a mortar and pestle just to get it really fine. You could use a coffee grinder if you have one, or a spice grinder if you happen to have that. But really, we're just looking to get this really fine. Grinding the tea just has the added benefit of releasing that aroma. It smells like heaven. Okay, so we will add the tea to 3 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/3 cup of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt. So we will just sift this all together and then we'll work in the butter. It's another no mixer recipe. Next up, I've got a stick and a half of butter that I've just cut into tablespoon size chunks, and we're going to add that directly into the flour mix and just incorporate this. You can use a pastry blender. I just use my fingers. You just kind of work the butter into the flour, squeezing together until you have kind of pea-sized chunks of butter throughout the mix. Once the butter is fully incorporated, it will look like this. You'll just see some kind of shaggy pieces of butter throughout the flour. We're going to pop this in the fridge while we mix the buttermilk and egg together. Next up, I've got 1 egg that I'm going to beat together with 3/4 cup of buttermilk. We'll just stir this together with a fork. And we'll also, we've got those blackberries ready to go. Now it's time to mix our wet and dry ingredients together. So this comes together pretty quickly. I'm just mixing the buttermilk and egg into this flour mixture. We'll just stir it until it's combined and then knead it a few times on the counter. I'm just dumping this dough out onto a floured counter, and we will sort of work it together till it becomes one cohesive mass. I'm just gonna fold it together a few times. After a few turns, your dough will look like this, and then we're just gonna fold some blackberries inside. It will crush them, but that's okay. Once the blackberries are incorporated, we will just cut these scones, put them on a parchment-lined baking pan, and I'm just gonna keep re-rolling the scraps and cutting out these scones. Look how cute. Once your scones are cut, just going to brush them with a little buttermilk and put them in a 400-degree oven. At this point, you could add a little sugar on top before you bake, but I think I'm gonna make a lemon glaze for these. So, because these are tiny, I'm only gonna cook them for about 15 minutes. This glaze is kind of an afterthought, and there are no real measurements. I'm just gonna throw together some lemon zest, lemon juice, a little powdered sugar, and vanilla, and the proportions, just taste it till it tastes good to you. Some people like it really sweet, some not so much. And out of the oven, we have tiny scones. I'm just gonna put these on a rack to cool, and I'm gonna go ahead and drizzle just a little bit of that lemon glaze on top and let that set up. Tiny and not too terribly sweet. And the lemon glaze, that was a really good idea. It sets off the blackberries and the tea. Come on, you don't even need a mixer for these. Give them a try. See you next time.